welcome to my channel if you are new here. If you don't know already, I gave birth to a baby boy about 7 months ago. Actually, I've been meaning to make this video for like literally months, but you know, I'm a new mom, so I'm gonna use that as my excuse, but I'm just now finally getting around to it, and I've definitely wanted to share my birth story for myself, to have it documented for my memories, and also just because I want to share with you guys. And I've been asked a lot about what it was like giving birth during the pandemic, so I just wanted to share my story and what the experience was like for me personally. So I ended up giving birth at the end of May, so we were having kind of a peak in cases during that time. Not as big of a peak as we're having now during this like winter surge, but it was still scary because it was really brand new and just nobody knew like how long it was going to last, or I don't know, I just feel like we didn't have a ton of information yet. We had just all started wearing masks and everything was just new and had been like dropped on us all. Back in March when the lockdowns first started happening, I was about 28 weeks when like they started to like close the schools and to limit how many people were in the stores and all of that stuff that we're still living with today. I was just entering my 3rd trimester, and basically my husband and we lost all of our work because we're musicians, so the music industry basically shut down, and just kind of bunkered down at home. We decided we wanted to do our part to be super cautious and careful, social distancing, following all of the guidelines, and we also wanted to be extra careful because I was, you know, super pregnant and we didn't want to take any chances. So yeah, we kind of just used our time to like get ready for the baby, set up the car seat, set up his bedroom, like just do all the things. And we watched a lot of movies, we went for walks, we did social distancing hangs like outside, sitting really far apart with our friends and family. So that's basically what we did until the end of my pregnancy. We didn't even really go to grocery stores. I had some friends who would bring us groceries, and that was so sweet and helpful, and we also would just order things like when we could. So the only going out that I really did do was when I had to go to my prenatal appointments, which my husband was no longer allowed to come with me to. So I know a lot of people that actually got pregnant like towards the beginning of the pandemic, like in March, April, that time frame, and their husbands or partners were never able to come to even one single appointment. So I'm very grateful that I got my husband to at least be able to join the appointments up until I was like 6 months pregnant. He at least got to see some ultrasounds and hear the heartbeat, all that stuff. And then from there on out, I just got the little printed pictures, or I'd try to take like video footage for him, and that was how we did it. So obviously, due to the virus, all events and everything also had to be canceled. So I had my baby shower already all planned. Everyone had already RSVP'd. It was like a go. It was planned for the end of March and we had to cancel that. I was also doing prenatal yoga classes that I had just started, and my husband and I had just signed up for a birth class, a 9-week long birth class that I really loved. It was so great, and I highly recommend taking a long detailed birth class if you are able to. But we basically went to the very first class, which was like in the beginning of March, and then the rest of it got moved to Zoom. So moving forward to the end of my pregnancy and when I went into labor, I had my last doctor's appointment right when I turned 38 weeks, and I went in and I got checked to see if I was dilated or effaced at all yet, and the doctor told me that I was not dilated at all, and I was, I think, about like 10, maybe 20 at the most, but I think 10% effaced at that point. So she told me that I would probably not be giving birth anytime soon, that I would probably end up being late, and you know, to just get ready for it to be a while longer still. So fast forward to the very next day, I'm like chilling. My husband and I, obviously we were like prepared just in case. We had already set up the car seat and gotten everything like ready, you know, because we needed to have the important things ready. But one major thing that was going to be different due to the virus was our food plan. So if you can't tell by the name of my channel or from my previous videos, I am vegan, and you know, I never rely on places I go to, especially like in the hospital. I had no idea what kind of food they were going to have, if they were going to have vegan options at all. So I had this whole game plan that we were going to like prepare food ahead of time, like stuff that we could take. I had ordered us like this big cooler that we could pack with ice and just bring some things that we'd be able to have a couple meals from, and then bring like a ton of snacks. So we'll get to that in a minute, but basically the next day after that 38-week appointment, I was just having a normal day, chilling, went for a walk, did some cleaning, like the normal quarantine stuff. And then that night I watched a movie with my husband, and we had like a huge dinner. Like I made this huge giant pot of veggie soup, and I had like 3 bowls of it, which was like so much for my belly because my belly was already so tight. So I was like, oh, I ate way too much. And then I had like half a cantaloupe for dessert. So I was like, there was a lot of liquid in my belly, let's just say that. And the baby was kicking so much. I just remember telling Chris, my husband, I'll just call him Chris now because I'm tired of saying my husband. But yeah, I just kept telling Chris, like, he's kicking so hard, like what is going on? I don't get it. And I went onto the little like birth bouncy ball thing and was like trying to like calm him down. I don't know. I didn't know what I was doing, but you know, I was just trying things. And then we just finished our movie. I finished my giant cantaloupe, and I stood up and I felt this like giant bubble feeling like pop in my pants. And I was like, what was that? I was like just about to go to bed. Like I was so tired, and it was probably like 10:30 at this point. So I told Chris like, something just happened and I don't know what it means. I don't know if that's like what it feels like for your water to break or whatever. I wasn't expecting it because in my birth class, they did talk about like what to do if your water breaks, but the teacher said like that it was pretty uncommon for your water to break first. So since I thought it was pretty uncommon, I was like, okay, yeah, like I don't need to like study up too much on that possibility. So I decided to call labor and delivery at the hospital just to tell them and to like get their opinion. And I called and told them, and they were like, yeah, you need to come in like right now. And I was like, what? So I was actually having like bigger gushes that like were continuing to come out as time went on. It wasn't like this huge like waterfall all at once, but it was a slow progression of like, it just felt like little bubbles that were like, or big bubbles I should say, just kind of popping. I don't know. TMI, but that's the best way I can think of to explain it. So because I thought that I was gonna have some time to prepare, I hadn't prepared our meals yet. So we ended up just grabbing like our bag of snacks that we had prepared and some food. Obviously I didn't have time to like cook some grand meal at that point. So we were just like, well, we're just gonna have to see what the hospital has available. So we packed up, we left, and we drove to the hospital with our masks, our hand sanitizer, baby's clothes, all of our vegan snacks, and everything we could think of. So once we got to the hospital, they had a new protocol in place where I basically had to go in by myself first, get admitted. If I was admitted to the hospital, then Chris would be allowed to come in. And he was allowed to come as long as he never left the room. We always stayed in the same room together, no walking around, no leaving, no going back to the car and coming back. It was like, once you're in, and if you leave, you're out. So we got there, I waddled up there like best I could by myself, and they checked me in, hooked me up to the contraction monitors and checked me, and they were like, yep, you're in active labor, you're having contractions. At that point they were like mild enough that I wasn't really feeling them. I mean, I felt them a little bit, but it was just like mild period cramp feelings. Nothing like unmanageable. So at that point they also gave me 2 COVID tests. Very fun to have COVID tests while you're in labor. But they did the nose swab and they did a back of the throat swab. And then once they confirmed I was negative, they moved me into the delivery room that I would be in for the rest of my labor. And Chris was allowed to come in finally with the snacks. Yay! So this was probably like getting closer to 11:30, midnight-ish by this point. We got all set up and comfy, and again, my contractions weren't super bad at this point, but they did tell me that because my water broke first, I had a higher risk of infection. Apparently that's a thing if your water breaks first, because the barrier, I don't know if I'm using the right terminology here, but there's no barrier anymore between the baby, so there is a chance of infection, and they also don't want to check your dilation too often once your water has broken, because they can present bacteria to the baby. So because of that, once we got to like the early morning around 6 a.m., they were highly recommending to me that I start taking Pitocin, which helps speed along your labor, or speed up your contractions, basically. And I was really nervous about it, so they let me think about it for a while with Chris. We talked about it and decided, like, yeah, we don't want there to be a risk of infection, because they told us if that did happen, well, I might end up having to have a C-section to get the baby out faster and all of this stuff. So I decided to just go with their advice and start the Pitocin. Now, the Pitocin was kind of a shock to my system. It really sped up my contractions fast. Before I had the Pitocin, while my contractions were mild, they were really close together. They were like about 1 to 2 minutes apart. I don't know why. I don't understand why I thought they would be further apart. Maybe it's because my water broke first, but they were super close together. So once I had this Pitocin, it really increased the pain of my contractions, and that's when the pain started to become really severe and unbearable for me. And this was probably around like 8 a.m. the next morning, or the morning after being admitted to the hospital. So I went on for a few hours of just doing my breathing techniques and everything I could to try to ease the pain of my contractions. Not that there's anything you can do except to just moan and groan and breathe through them. And thankfully, Chris had done the birth class with me, and he was such a great support. He stood there with me, he like groaned with me when I needed him to, and held my hands, and it's just like a super primal experience. So it was supportive of him to be there, just like engaging with me and like just being as connected as he possibly can without being in labor himself. So I was super grateful to have him there with me. So I kept going this way all through the morning and into the early afternoon. And by a certain point, like, my body was just so exhausted. Like, these contractions, they hurt so bad, and they were so close together that I could barely breathe and like catch my breath or have any sort of break in between them. Like, by the time one ended, the next one was beginning, and I was just starting to feel like I cannot, like, this is too much. Like, how long is this gonna go on? So they checked me again at that point, and I was 1 centimeter. And I was just like, no, like, all this time. You know, when I look back, it wasn't that long of a time, but when you're in the moment, it just feels like forever. Like, if they tell you you need to wait another hour or 10 minutes even, you're just like, how am I gonna do this? So once they told me I was only 1 centimeter, I was just like, okay, I think I need some sort of pain relief here. Like, this is just too exhausting, and I don't know how long I can go on this way. And this was a really crazy thing for me to say, because prior to giving birth, I was very open-minded in the sense that, like, everyone says, oh, you can make your birth plan, but expect things not to go as planned. So I had that in mind. Like, I knew how I kind of wanted my birth experience to go, but I wasn't going to like completely deny any sort of straying from my plan if that's what I needed to do. So I was open to things, but I was also like, you know, wanting to have as natural delivery as I could. Well, I got an epidural. I at least asked for one. So at around 2 p.m. I asked for the epidural, and they said, well, because you're only 1 centimeter, we don't recommend it yet. And I was like, what do you mean you don't recommend it yet? They were like, we recommend like just giving you morphine, something to like ease the pain, but not do the full epidural because apparently there's risks of infection with that, and just a whole nother slew of things. So I did not want to get morphine. I was very scared of that. I didn't want to feel like loopy in my head or tired or out of it or anything. I have a really strong aversion to like being drugged up or any sort of like feeling not like myself. So I was like, okay, how dilated do I need to be before I can get the epidural? And they were like, okay, can you like just maybe try to wait till you get to 3 centimeters? So this was probably the hardest part of my whole labor, was just pushing through for the next few hours until I made it to 3 centimeters. And that probably took another 3 to 4 hours of just pushing through those contractions. And I just kept telling myself, like, this hurts so bad, but like it's going to end. Like, this is not permanent. This is temporary. And I just kept telling myself that, like, this is just a wave and it's gonna end, and doing everything I could. So finally, 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock, whenever it was, arrived, and I was 3 centimeters by this point, and I got to get the epidural. So even though I really wanted some relief at that point, I was still scared to get the epidural because it just sounds really scary. But once I got it, I was just like, this is such a great invention. It's the best thing I've ever experienced. Like, I'm so happy. I was just like so happy to like have a little bit of relief finally. But the process of putting it in was a little scary because I was having the contractions and I still had to get the needle stuck in my back and get everything administered before I could start feeling any relief. So they had me sit on the edge of the bed, hold Chris's hands, and like just stare at him right in front of me. And then they did the whole thing in the back. I didn't even want to know what they were doing. I was like, do not tell me if there's like a needle in my spine or something. Just please don't tell me. But, you know, that part went by quick and I started to feel better. So after getting that all settled around probably like 7 p.m. or so, the nurses came in and I think I got checked one more time at that point, and they were like, okay, yeah, you're still only 3 centimeters, so don't expect anything to happen anytime soon. Like, it's probably gonna be sometime later tomorrow that you end up having this baby, so try to get a good night's sleep, try to get some relief, and we'll see you in the morning, basically. And I was just like, okay, I guess so, if you say so. So we tried to get some rest. I was most comfortable on my side. I don't remember why, but I just remember like I needed to be on my side. Maybe that's like how I felt like I could sleep, like I wasn't like slouching back or something. But basically like you're numb from the waist down. And I was numb to the point where like I could still, it felt like when your arm falls asleep or something, you're still like a little tingly. I could feel a little bit of tingliness in my feet, and I actually liked that because it, you know, just reminded me like, okay, I still have some feeling, like it's gonna be okay. So anyways, I had them put me on my side so I could try to get some rest. Well, my epidural kept kind of like leaning towards whatever side I was sleeping on or resting on. So if I was lying on my right side, like the epidural would kind of like drain to the right side of my body, if that makes sense. And then I would start feeling my contractions on the left side. So every hour or so, I kept having Chris and a nurse come and flip me over to the other side so that it would drain to the other side, and it would even back out, and then eventually I would need to go back to the other side because it just kept trading places to where I was feeling my contractions. So around midnight, I woke Chris up and I was like, hey, I'm starting to feel some pain. I'm kind of uncomfortable. Can you help flip me over with the nurse? So he called the nurse in and they flipped me over, and then the heart rate monitor for the baby started to beep. And the nurse looked at it and she was like, oh no, your baby's heart rate is dropping. And I was like, what does that mean? Like, what are you talking about? And all of a sudden, like, she didn't even call anyone. I think they must just have like monitors out in the halls or something that tell you what's going on. But a bunch of nurses and doctors like came into my room. They started like grabbing stuff and talking about something and looking at the charts. And I was just like, what? Like, what are you guys doing? What's going on? And a nurse ran over to me, put a mask on my face, not a COVID mask, but an oxygen mask on my face, and told me to start breathing. She was just like, breathe in deep. Okay, keep breathing in deep. And I was just like, is somebody gonna tell me like what's happening here? And so they finally just told me like, well, when you flip over, like your baby's heart rate is dropping, so we need to check on what's going on. So they checked me again, and all of a sudden I was 10 centimeters, and this was like the best news because I was so scared at this point. And they looked at me and they just go, "Oh, good news, you're ready to push." And I was just like, what? Like, they told me I was gonna have to wait till tomorrow, and now it's midnight and I'm ready to push. Okay, let's get this show on the road. So at this point they started like preparing everything for me to push, and the nurses started to coach me through like how I was gonna push. They basically told me I was gonna take in a deep breath, I was gonna hold my breath, and when I pushed, not to make any sounds, which was news to me because, you know, in the movies women are like screaming when they push. Well, in reality, they told me, don't make any sound, hold your breath, push, and that we're gonna count to 10 for every push. I'm gonna push for 10 seconds and then stop. And there is downtime in between the pushing because if you don't know, you have to push when you're having a contraction. So basically, you wait for a contraction to peak, and then you push, and we do it like 2 or 3 times for 10 seconds, and then the contraction ends, and you take a break until the next contraction starts, like a minute later. So you have a little bit of time to just like recover from the constant pushing. So I started pushing, I did my very first push, and they were like, "Oh, you're doing a great job." But unfortunately, like, the baby's heart rate dropped. So every time I pushed, his heart rate would drop, and that was kind of getting scary. So they told me they were going to get ready to have to do the vacuum like procedure. They basically just said, we have to get this baby out like within the next few minutes for his safety because his heart rate keeps dropping. So we're gonna get this vacuum thing ready to use, and you know, if that doesn't help get him out, then we might have to go into a C-section. Of course, they were really trying not to say the word C-section until they had to, but that's basically what they were telling me was like, we're gonna try the vacuum first. If the baby's not out in a few minutes, we're gonna have to get him out. So I was so determined at this point. I was like, I did not just go through like 27 hours of labor here to end up having a C-section. And I was like totally terrified of having a C-section. And I know like people have them every day. My mom had it for me. Like, I know if I had to have it, I would have it, and it would happen, and I would recover and it would be fine. But I just like with all my heart and all my might did not want to go through that. So I took all the energy I had and I mustered up all my strength, and I just did like these huge pushes, as much as I could possibly push into the right part of my body. During my second contraction where I was able to push, they told me they were able to see his head, and the guy in the back was like getting the vacuum ready, but they were like, wait, hold off on that, like we can see his head already. And I was like, oh my gosh, are you serious? Like, it's working, it's actually working, how is this happening? And then I did my third contraction, big push, and he just came out. It was crazy. As soon as they got the head out, the rest of his body just like slid out like a fish. It was like, okay, the hard part's over, his head's out, bam, your baby's out. And then at that moment, I felt like the biggest relief I had ever felt in my life. It's like I would go through all the pain and everything all over again just to feel like that relief that you feel when the baby gets out. You're just like, thank goodness it's over. Like, I can't believe that just happened. And so they immediately put the baby on my chest, skin to skin, and I was just like in shock. Like, I didn't cry or anything. I'm not like a huge crier in the moment with things. I'm more of like a delayed reactor. So in the moment I was just in shock, and I was holding the baby, and I was just like, I remember just saying to the nurses and to Chris, I was like, what just happened? Like, how did that just happen? Did I actually just have a baby? Like, how is this happening? And they were like, yeah, you did it. And I was just like, oh. It was so emotional because like my original envisioning of my birth was that I would have my mom there, you know, I was thinking about getting a doula, having like friends there to support like throughout the journey, and it just like none of it happened the way that I had imagined. And it still happened, and it was still beautiful. And when it, you know, as everybody would say, when it comes down to it, like the most important thing was that the baby was healthy, I was healthy, like we were safe, everything was okay. And while I do feel like I did grieve a little bit that experience of having my mom there and like a bigger support system, I just like felt so grateful that I had my husband. That was like really what I needed. I needed him there with me. I needed somebody to like experience this with me, and you know, especially having him, it was just so important. But it was really emotional, you know, like sending the pictures of the newborn like to my mom. She was waiting at my house because she had done a full like 2-week quarantine before I gave birth. So before she came over, she was already prepared. So thankfully her quarantine was already over because she was planning to come over a week early anyways. So yeah, I mean, I'm getting ahead of myself, but it was just like so many emotions, and I finally got to see this little cute face that I was just like, where did you come from? Like, you're just so like just this little baby. Like, it's just so fascinating and beautiful how your body can like grow a human being and then push it out. I know I'm getting over the top here, but that's just like how I felt. So once he was out, they took him, and well, they did let him have some skin to skin first, and then they took him over to do the cord clamping, and Chris got to cut the umbilical cord, and they swaddled him up and got him all warm and brought him back to me. And I had to obviously stay where I was because I couldn't move. And I had to finish pushing. Yeah, you're not done pushing when the baby comes out. You still have to deliver the placenta. So the doctors were there working on that with me, and then I had to get some stitching. I had like a 2nd-degree tear, which sounds terrifying. It's really nothing to be afraid of. Yes, I was sore after, but that's to be expected, and you just have so much going on. It's like you're not thinking about it too much, and the stitches, they dissolved, and it's okay. Like, it got better, it healed, it was temporary. So if you're scared of tearing, I'm here to tell you I was scared of tearing too, and it was not as bad as I thought. And especially with the epidural, I didn't even feel myself tear. I had to ask them after, like, did I tear? What happened? What's the situation down there? So after I was all cleaned up and done with the birthing process, they moved me into the postpartum recovery area, and we got a new room, and I got to just rest, and I started learning how to breastfeed and just spending time bonding with the baby. Oh, I got to eat finally. That was exciting. So I know I talked earlier about how I was afraid they weren't going to have any vegan options at the hospital, and they did. I was actually pleasantly surprised and thankfully didn't starve because once you finish giving birth, you were just like so hungry. I was so ready to eat. And while I would have loved to like have, you know, my favorite vegan restaurant food like delivered or something, that wasn't an option. So thankfully we had food available to us at the hospital, and it was really good. So we stayed in the hospital for I think one more day. So we finally went home like Tuesday afternoon. There's like a bunch of tests and different things they do. Like once the baby's born, he had to have like a hearing test and just all these things that I can't even remember. But he actually failed his hearing test, not because he couldn't hear, but just because he wouldn't stay still enough. They have to like put these things on and keep the baby still. Well, he was fidgety, so we had to go back to get another hearing test like 3 days later. But as far as COVID goes, we did wear masks like pretty much the whole time, except for when we were alone in our room, and then when I was like in active labor and pushing, I didn't wear a mask, but they had double tested me to make sure that I didn't have the virus. So I think that's more for the safety of like the nurses and doctors, so that like they could be around me without a mask and not have to worry about their own safety, which totally makes sense. And I think for Chris, they just kind of assume that like your partner is negative if you're negative or is positive if you're positive. So thankfully, that wasn't too big of a deal. We just, you know, took our masks on and off. I used hand sanitizer like whenever I was eating or drinking, or when I would wash my hands as much as I could when I could get to the bathroom. But yeah, other than that, it wasn't like too crazy, except for not being able to have people come, not being able to leave the room. But that was pretty much it as far as I think the differences go. It was definitely like nerve-wracking on our end because, you know, we'd been so quarantined up until that point, like not even going to the stores, grocery shopping. So to have to go to a hospital and all of a sudden we're like meeting dozens of people, nurses and doctors and pediatrician and like the lactation consultants and just all these different people that you meet in the hospital. So it was nerve-wracking on our end, but again, it wasn't too bad. It was like, we have to do this, so we don't have a choice. And also they're all wearing masks and we're in a hospital. They're very cautious, so we don't really have to be too worried. And thankfully we were totally fine. Once we went home, we just continued to keep quarantining because we had a newborn at that point and the virus was still, you know, surging as it still is today. So yeah, that was basically my experience. And once I got home, I had my mom there to help us out. So that was really, really, really helpful for us and comforting to have my mom with me. And it was also super sweet. My friends and my sister-in-law, they had put up some signs and stuff outside, like decorated the outside of my house, saying like, welcome home, Marshall, and like, congratulations and stuff like that. And it was just so sweet and I felt so loved and like, I just felt my community's presence even though I couldn't physically be with people. It was still so comforting to have that and it made me feel so good. So friends and beautiful sister-in-law, if you guys are watching this, I love you guys so much and thank you for everything you did during that time for me. So the last thing I want to say is just that when I was pregnant, I was watching birth stories like this and I would get so nervous. Like, part of it comforted me, but part of it made me so nervous because the stories themselves just sound so terrifying. And I just want to tell you, like, if you're listening to this and it sounds terrifying to you, you don't need to worry. Like, it's okay to worry and it's okay to feel your feelings and like express yourself. But I'm just here to tell you that it just happens. Like, you worry about it, you worry, and then it just like happens and you're just in labor or you're just in the hospital and things are just happening minute by minute. You're taking it 1 minute at a time at that point. And your body knows what to do, the doctors know what to do. It just goes by like, I don't even know how to describe it, but I was so scared. And then here I am, like now I have the baby and we're fine. I'm just here to tell you that you're not alone. If you are feeling scared, know that it's gonna be okay. And I just really, if I would recommend anything, it would be to take a really detailed birth class or at least read up on like the birthing process as much as you possibly can. Try to read a lot of positive birth stories. Try to learn about all of the hospital like terminology and things that you're gonna need to know or things that they might talk about while you're there, because that really helped while we were there when they would bring stuff up and we would know like, okay, we learned this is what that means, instead of just being like, I don't know anything, like I guess whatever you think is best. Because sometimes while you're in the hospital you need to advocate for yourself, or you need your partner or family member or somebody to advocate for you if you can't on your own. So that would be my biggest recommendation, is just to be as informed as possible. Know that you're not alone and it's all going to be okay. Thank you so much for listening. If you're still here listening to this long story, thank you for letting me share my story with you. And if you want to see more of my videos in the future, don't forget to click the subscribe button and leave me a like, leave me a comment so I can say hi. And yeah, thank you guys so much, and I will see you in another video. Bye!